And welcome into Priced Out the documentary. I'm Andru Morgan. I'm going to be hosting some of them with you. But the main person that you want to talk to and you want to get all your information from is Mr. Cornelius Swart. How you doing today?
Hey, Andrew, how are you? I'm good.
Great. Now, Priced Out. Tell us a little bit about exactly what is that. Before we get into who you are and all the other things, first off, what is Priced Out? Give us some background information.
Yeah, Priced Out is it's a documentary we've just released in the fall of last year, and it's a documentary about gentrification in Portland, Oregon, and it's the sequel to a film that we had done about gentrification in Albina, northeast Portland, which is a traditionally black neighborhood, back in the 1990s. So we did a film about the early stages of gentrification in Portland's black neighborhoods. Um, and that film was released in 2002. So 15 years later, we went back to some of the folks who were featured in that first film to see how much they had changed, to see how much the neighborhood had changed, and and that's what you get with Priced Out.
All right. So who are you like so what caused you to say, all right, this is a subject matter that I want to cover?
Um, well, the the issue of gentrification is something I've been covering, off and on for about 20 years here in Portland, ever since we did the first film. And uh, the woman who was the focus of the first film, Nikki Williams, who is a single mom. She grew up in the neighborhood. Um, she was sort of a struggling single mom in the late 1990s when we met her. 15 years later, she came back and asked us to do a sequel to the film. 15 years ago, the film ends with her saying, I pretty much welcome the gentrification. I'm glad to see some investment in the neighborhood that has been down for so long. 15 years later, she's completely, she has the opposite view. Her neighborhood to her has been decimated. And so that's why we felt obligated that we should go back and look at the issue again.
Okay. So you personally, who like what was your personal investment into this? Because there is a good storyline there, but there had to be something that drew you to it personally. So who are you, from a personal standpoint, that drew you to this subject matter?
Well, I live in the neighborhood, and I introduced myself in the second film in Priced Out as a gentrifier, somebody who came into the neighborhood in the late 1990s, um, and I'm a member of the community as well. So I've always followed the issue as a reporter or as a filmmaker for 20 years. And so Nikki was actually my neighbor. She only lived a couple of blocks away from me. So in Priced Out, you really see both of our lives. You see Nikki's life as it changed over 15 years, and you also see how my life changed over 15 years and our different relationship to how the neighborhood has changed. For her, she kind of loses her community. She doesn't lose her home because she owns her home, and I do too. But she loses that sense of community. On the other hand, I wind up going to the stores that open up, and it's I utilize more of the changes that have happened in the community.
Do you feel like you've gained a community as you've watched the gentrification process kind of, take place? Do you feel like you gained a community, or do you feel like you actually lost a community?
Yeah, I don't think I've gained a community. I think I've gained amenities. I think there's more stuff that I can walk around to and go to, and that's pleasant. Um, but I did kind of relate to my neighbors, my older neighbors, uh, better. I don't kind of know where people are coming from as much anymore. But I'm a community reporter, so I kind of the cobbler's children have no shoes. So
Yeah.
I kind of never have a community because I'm always kind of at a distance from everything.
Now, you say about that with you personally. Where are you from? Are you a native of Portland? Like, how did you end up in a situation where you were in Northwest Portland or Northeast Portland?
Yeah, I'm originally from New Jersey, and I had gone to school for film for documentary. back in New York City, and I moved out here in 1995 with my partner. We had a daughter, and so by '98 we actually wound up moving into the neighborhood. And so, I come from a New Jersey perspective on things, which is
Right.
a little different. I mean, I'm used to neighborhoods gentrifying, but I'm also used to a kind of like a more diverse working class um, cultural norm, so to speak, which is a little different than the West Coast, and quite different than Portland, which is so white, um, and has sort of this very kind of liberal mainstream ethos to it, which is a little different than New Jersey.
So let me ask you this question because you said something that was interesting, and I've been hit with this term for the last year, that Portland is the whitest, city in America. What does that mean? Because I have my personal experience of what it means, but what does it mean to you, and what do you think the overall tone of people who live here? What do you think? How do you think they take that this is the whitest city in America?
Um, I think it was actually whiter, unbelievably, when I moved here. When I first came to Portland, the cover of the one of the alternative weekly magazines, the Willamette Week, the cover said "Honky Town, Portland, whitest city in America," and that was 1994.
Right,
Um, and so it's actually gotten more diverse since that time. It went something from like 90% white to now it's like 76% white. But but what's happened is that the concentration of white folks has all coalesced around the city center, right? So the center of the city has actually become whiter. Um, and to me, what that does is there's a kind of an underlying assumption that everyone thinks they have, right? Which is this sort of, this liberal, environmental, progressive ethos, and it's very difficult or awkward to have a contrary opinion or to have a contrary color of skin or point of view, just because there's so much consensus that happens almost unconsciously that yeah, I just it's just a strange environment. It's like a cult that
yeah,
that isn't expressed, right? But everyone's just like, oh, everybody agrees, right?
right.
Um, and then of course I hear from folks all the time that both white and folks of color that they're just uncomfortable by the lack of diversity. It's just weird, or they just go for long periods of time where they're just like, I just need to see some diversity. It's like going without water or air.
Yeah. Now, and that's one of the more interesting things that when you look at the trailer, you get that feel that you see that that's one of the things that people of color need here in Portland. That's what's missing. Even just from watching the trailer, I picked up on that. Being new to the Portland area, I personally found myself thinking that same thought. Like, I need more interactions with my culture. Um, what are some of the reactions since you've been screening the film? What are some of the reactions that you've gotten first from people of color in relation to, like has that brought up emotions and feelings and different things of that nature? Or,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what we hear a lot from folks of color or people who grew up in the neighborhood is the film can be hard to watch. Not because it's a bad film, but because it brings up experiences that other people are having that they themselves have experienced. And we even get it from people of color in other cities um, who have just had the same experience in their city. Um, so it tends to be a very emotional film. People have a range of reactions from, they get angry, they get, they just feel down, um, or they get riled up and want to do something. So that's, the reactions can range from people of color. And another thing that's kind of very special about the story of the African American community in Oregon is obviously that because it's such a small community, that when sort of the one black neighborhood gets gentrified, there's really no place to go, or at least that's the way many people that we've talked to felt, that
right.
there's no place for what's been called a gathering place for cultural warmth is what one person has said in another film, not ours, but it was a good articulation of what a lot of people that we've talked to express, and that's really the journey that Nikki, our main focus, has, is that even though she doesn't lose a home because she owns it, she loses a community.
Yeah. That's one of the things that from one city to the next we take advantage of, knowing that we have a community that we can call our own, like that you can go to, and even if you don't like some of the stuff that typically goes on, but when you once you get to a community and it's not there, it's kind of disturbing. Portland does something interesting that I noted that when I go to like Dawson Park, which is the area we're really talking about, I noticed that there's a large amount of African Americans there during the daytime, and it seems like they're almost bussed in. But but it at night or in the morning, I got up the next morning, I was staying near Dawson Park, and I didn't see any African Americans near. Like it was just I was out, went for a jog, and it was people on their bikes getting coffee. It looked like what I thought Portland was.
Mm-hmm.
And then from like 11 to 11, just that one section of the park. So is that something that Portland does where it gives the appearance of diversity, but it's really not there? Has that been your experience with what you've observed from Portland?
Well, one of the interesting things you see in the film is Nikki says that she doesn't go to places she used to go to, just because they're so overrun with white people. And so, if you look at some of the demographic statistics, there are still, black folks in the neighborhood, but they're not as visible as they used to be out in public. And it may, I'm speculating at this point, but for Nikki's part, she doesn't feel comfortable. So even though she lived in the neighborhood, you almost never saw her out in public in the neighborhood, because she didn't go to the parks anymore, because nobody was hanging out in the park. And she was like, if you do hang out in the park in any significant numbers, people call the police on you. She doesn't go down the street with the new shops. There's lots of new shops, but she doesn't walk down the street because she gets looked at like she's an alien. So there is this kind of weird dynamic going on, that even if there is some diversity in the neighborhood, you may not see it.
Yeah. Do you feel in this, and we're going to go back to some more specific questions here in a minute about the film itself and about the
Mm-hmm.
movement that's happening in Portland. But I have one more question for you as a person who lives in the middle of a neighborhood that's gone through this. I've seen a large number of people who have like Black Lives Matter signs in their yard. But the stigma, but what I hear a lot of people say is that's just for show. You know, what's your experience with that? What have you observed with the Black Lives Matter movement, being a sign in the yard here?
Well, I mean, I don't know. It's hard to, ascribe motives to other people without talking to them. I'm just a reporter, so, I just kind of relay information that I've found, or the experiences I've had, and just relay that. Um, I the folks I talk to who are white folks, in Portland, they're very progressive. They believe in their causes. They believe in helping other people. Um, but as a community, taken as a group, I think because there is so much, because there's no diversity, that creates a lot of blind spots. And so I think when we show the film to folks, we often hear from white folks, like kind of like an awkward, "Oh, I hadn't thought of that."
Yeah.
Right? So it's not a it's not a from the people I've talked to, I don't get a sense of deliberately trying to exclude people or to like put a facade. I just see often a blind spot. Like I didn't even think to look in that direction. Um, and now that I'm aware of it, I'm not sure what to do, or how to feel. Um,
Yeah. So, what are some of the reactions that you get from Caucasians who come to watch the movie? What are some of the different reactions?
a lot of people want to do something about it. A lot of people are very moved. A lot of people, the film is very balanced. Well, we try to be balanced. We try to show a lot of different points of view at the same time, um, while still delivering a message that has a point of view. So a lot of people are like, thank you for for showing different perspectives on the issue. And a lot of people just feel very emotional. A lot of people cry out of they cry or they empathize with Nikki's personal struggle, which is very
Right.
specific to her. And a lot of people are moved that way, and they want to do something. They want to get involved, or they want to find out more about, well, you know, what can I do as a person who wants to be helpful, not part of the problem.
That's one of the things that I love about the film is that even if you can't identify, even if you can't empathize with someone who's experienced displacement due to gentrification, you can empathize with Nikki's story because we've all been displaced at some point in our life. And it carries over to then, for me, it definitely carried over for me saying, I have to be involved. I have to be a part of this because it hit a familiar place.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And
so,
and Nikki's story is one of loss of community, which, while it's very powerful because of her experience, because she's coming out of the African American experience in this such a white city, but losing a community is something that so many people can relate to. Um, Not just in Portland. I mean, in Portland, it's like almost every neighborhood's changed over the last couple of years. So many people feel like they've lost the place they used to live in. But I think most of us have, like you say, been displaced or lost our community in some way or another at some point in our life.
yes. So with Portland itself, where's Portland at when it comes to dealing with some of these issues of housing? Because the documentary goes into people fighting for fair housing and fighting for all these different things. So where's the city of Portland when it comes to that fight?
Well, what you'll see over the course of the film is how gentrification starting in the early '90s, or the early '90s, we'll say. Um, it goes from being a local issue to the black neighborhood, in which there's rising investment and displacement, and some improvement and displacement, and that cycle begins to it's sort of spreading out to the rest of the city. So by 2013, 14, 15, neighborhoods all across the city are beginning to see these rising prices, and folks getting displaced regardless of their background. The working class, working poor, lower middle class, people, whatever their background is, are getting losing their housing. So we also see that there's a backlash against this, and people literally take to the streets, starting in the African American community and then spreading to the rest of the city. We see that there's a huge pushback against that, and that has led to a lot of legislative changes. A epic housing bond was passed, $250 million in taxpayer money for affordable housing. An activist, Chloe Udali, here in Portland, was propelled into city council. She's the first renter that's ever occupied such a seat, and she's put out some legislation that basically says if you jack up the rent over 10% and your tenant can't afford it, you have to pay to move them. And that, perhaps combined with a lot of new construction, a lot of new apartments coming online, we are starting to see rents come down, or the growth in rents coming down.
As a person who just moved here, that was something I didn't understand. I couldn't understand for the life of me why it was almost impossible for me to find a place in Portland that was in a decent price range. And now I kind of, this documentary helped me understand that because, moving here, the perception is come on in, we're all weird, and this housing's available, everything's fair, this is entrepreneur land. And how are people? It's got me curious about how are people making do when rent does spike. Let's just say 9.9%, 99%. Like, what are some of the programs and the methods? Like, how are people surviving when they're rent burdened?
Right. I mean, and that's the thing. About half of the population in Portland is renters, are renters, and then of them, at least in 2016, half of those folks who did rent paid more than 30% of their income towards their rent, and that's what the federal government calls rent burdened. And so, and that's basically the cause of that was a pinch that was created by the market in which prices went up so quickly, and a landlord could evict you so easily and so fast that people had to absorb the rent increase because they didn't have time or money to move. They didn't have the short-term cash, so they had to take the long-term hit of absorbing a big rent increase, and there was no place to go. So what are people doing? People are moving from the center of the city out to the fringes of the city, out to East Portland. They're moving up to Washington State, to Southwest Clark County, moving out to the suburbs, and they're moving out of the state entirely. We're seeing folks here in Albina. Many are moving back to the South.
Yeah, for me that was my only option was to move to Clark County, and it was a lot cheaper. It was a lot more, a lot more affordable. And to be honest with you, I see a lot of minorities out here. There's not a, there isn't a full community yet. Where you see a lot of people gathering together. However, you could see that that's something that's beginning to form, and you just kind of go into Portland just to take care of business.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and at some point, I'm curious as to see, where does this leave the city of Portland in general? Will there ever be a time and a place, or where they call people back in, or is there things already set up where they're asking for people to come back into the city?
Yeah, in 2015, the city of Portland sort of started a right to return policy, which is something that's been going on in other cities as well. And that basically means that if you used to live in the area, you kind of get in the front of the line for housing assistance. How effective that's been, it's still too soon to tell. A lot of people think it hasn't been effective at all. Other people take a wait and see kind of approach. It takes a very long time to build affordable housing, to build subsidized housing. So even housing projects that were promised in 2015 here at the beginning of 2018, they're not finished yet. So and it's only like 100 units or so that we're talking about.
All right. So before we start to wrap up, I got a couple of questions for you about the film. Now, would you say it's necessary for us to watch Northwest Passage before Priced Out? Would they help, or do they stand alone?
I think they stand alone, and really um, the first film, Northeast Passage, is available on our website. You can see it for free, and it's really about the late 1990s and the struggles that these neighborhoods have. These neighborhoods all across the country had between issues with like crime and disinvestment, and kind of the why would someone want to see gentrification, right? But by the end of the film, you can see how someone would think any investment was a good idea. But hopefully, you'll also get a sense that that gentrification is coming, and that there will be a downside. So that film you can really watch in its own, and this Priced Out goes back and forth between the two films enough that you'll understand where Nikki's coming from, and you'll understand the history.
What are some of the phases? If I'm in a city and I'm noticing some changes, what are some of the things? What are the phases of gentrification like? Can you give me like a description of the different time, the different things that would be expected in recognizing gentrification?
Yeah, we try to kind of lay out history in a kind of an arc, and we go all the way back to the founding of the neighborhood. So the first phase is sort of what you might call ghettoization. It's basically an area is there's a population or some activity that's sort of confined to a given area forcibly, and a kind of a fence is drawn around it, and investment and services are withdrawn. The next phase is abandonment, in which even the people who are there try to get out, and the businesses get abandoned, the houses get abandoned, things board up, and there's no even sense of ownership, or that all of that declines. Then revitalization happens, in which some small investments begin to come in, and it seems like it's going to be good for everybody. Um, the next phase is gentrification, in which a lot of investment comes in to a given neighborhood, and it's really only investment for the newcomers. It's not intended to be for the people who already live there. And there's a lot of displacement. And the last phase is housing crisis, where there's displacement from neighborhoods all over the place, and there's no place left to go because the housing prices are too high for the local wages in every part of the city.
Okay. So, from city to city, what cities have you looked at in the United States that you could say has been identified as cities that you know are undergoing different phases of gentrification?
Probably the 25 largest cities in the country are all having they're all on that spectrum from revitalization to housing crisis. So you probably San Francisco would be solidly in housing crisis. Seattle might be in housing crisis. Um, and then you have places like Cleveland or Cincinnati, um, or um, even like in the Southwest, you're starting to see, Austin, um, where there are neighborhoods that are gentrifying, and other neighborhoods may be affordable or even still in abandonment phases. So it's like a patchwork of things that are going on there. But almost all of the top 25 cities have some level of some neighborhoods are beginning to see revitalization moving into a place of gentrification.
So, as far as priced out the documentary, what's your effort? What push will you have to assure that this documentary is going to get a chance to be seen in those markets?
Yeah, I mean, we're trying our best. It's important to know that this was like a volunteer-driven project. It's sort of a labor of love, both films, um, and you know, our goal is to get it seen by as many people. But it's very unclear on whether it's going to show up on Showtime or Netflix or any of those places. But we've mostly been pushing for community level screenings and educational screenings. And so right now we're showing it all over the place here in Portland. Organizations come to us, and because we don't have any capacity to organize screenings at this point, but people come to us, they organize the screenings, and then they show it to their groups for free. So could be a African American community center, could be a group of neighborhood activists, could be the city, of Beaverton that organizes these screenings. And then across the country, we're seeing more and more groups come to us. Um, African American community centers like the Greenwood Community Center in Tulsa. We're seeing historic preservation groups like in Pittsburgh, and we're seeing universities like in St. Louis who approach us to show the film. And so we are trying to partner with community groups all over the country to show the film, and we try to make it available to everyone who has a group that wants to show it to their folks.
All right. So, is there anything else before we wrap up here that you would want to share about the film, the about gentrification, or anything at all?
Well, I think it's just the plans for the podcast is to continue to talk about gentrification, both here in Portland and in other cities, as we start to show the film in other cities. So we have a screening up in Tulsa, we have a screening in Nashville coming, and we're probably going to have more podcasts about what's going on in those communities. And certainly, if folks go to our website, priceoutmovie.com. They can both contact us if they would like to organize a screening in their community, or if they just want to talk about the issue as we start to roll the podcasts um, on to different communities. If they want to come on, or they think we should talk to such and such a person in this city, we'd love to hear from folks. And yeah, just sign up for our email list and stay tuned so we can keep people informed about how and when they can see the film.
All right. If they want to reach out to you, they can go to the website and email, and potentially email you if they want to screen it themselves. And so, Well, thank you for giving us so much information today. And next week, what can they expect? Or next time, I should say, what can they expect?
Well, I think we're just going to try to do this as often as we
Yeah,
can, but we're not committed to a schedule yet.
yeah,
So the next one hopefully will be on Andrew's turf in Tulsa, right? I think we're either
correct.
going to talk about Tulsa or we're going to talk about Nashville next. So stay tuned for that. Those are interesting communities.
All right, thank you.